My name is Lorraine Carter and I am 66 years old. Yesterday, a single notification from my phone shattered everything I thought I understood about my family. It wasn't a call, not even a message I was meant to hear. It was a voice memo, one my daughter Jenna had sent to her husband Ethan. But instead of warmth or laughter, I heard something that made my stomach drop. I heard my own child speaking about me as if I were nothing more than an obstacle she couldn't wait to remove, and what she said next is something I will never forget. "She's in the way, Ethan. Brooke already figured out how we can transfer the deed without her noticing. I found a place, it's only $800 a month. St. Augustine is ready to take her next week." Each word felt sharp, deliberate, and final. I sat frozen, replaying the message again and again, hoping somehow I had misunderstood. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't a passing thought. This was a plan, and I had just accidentally discovered it. That night I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words echoing in my head, refusing to fade. Every memory of my daughter, every sacrifice I had ever made, clashed with what I had just heard. By the time the sun rose, something inside me had changed. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't confused. I was certain. I dressed carefully, gathered every important document I owned, and walked out of my house with a quiet resolve. I didn't feel fear. I felt something far more dangerous, a plan forming, one they would never see coming. I was only 19 when I became a mother. Jenna's father disappeared before she even had the chance to open her eyes. One day he was there, and the next he was gone, leaving me alone with a newborn and a future I hadn't planned for. I remember standing in that tiny apartment, staring at a crib I could barely afford, promising myself that no matter how hard life became, my daughter would never feel unwanted. At the time, I thought that promise would define my life. I didn't realize it would also shape the very situation I was now trying to survive. Those early years were heavy in ways I didn't fully understand until much later. I worked wherever I could, cleaning houses, offices, even laundromats late into the night. My hands were always sore, my back constantly aching, but I never let Jenna see that. To her, I was just mom. The one who walked her to school every morning, who stitched her dresses by hand, who made sure she always looked presentable even when we had nothing. I still remember one cold morning when her coat had torn at the seams after being soaked in rain. That night, I sat under dim light, carefully patching it together so she could wear it again without feeling different. At the time, it felt like a small thing, but looking back, I realized those moments were everything. Or at least, I thought they were. Every dollar I earned went into her future. I didn't spend on myself. I didn't indulge in anything unnecessary. When other children arrived at school in brand new uniforms, Jenna walked beside me, but her shoes were polished, her clothes were clean, and she held her head high. And when she would kiss my cheek and say, "Thank you, Mom, you're the best," it made every sacrifice feel worth it. I believed those words carried meaning that would last forever. I believed love like that couldn't fade, but I was about to learn how wrong I was. When it came time for college, the cost felt impossible. $15,000 a year might as well have been a mountain I had no way of climbing. But I climbed it anyway. I borrowed against my home, sold my only ring, even parted with my mother's sewing machine, the last piece of her I had left. I told myself it didn't matter because Jenna was building a future I never had. I believed that one day she would look back and understand everything I had done. I thought that kind of sacrifice would create a bond nothing could break, but I didn't realize that sometimes giving too much doesn't build gratitude, it builds expectation. When Jenna met Ethan, I felt relief for the first time in years. He seemed stable, respectful, and responsible. He had a steady job and carried himself with confidence. In those early days, he treated her well, and that was enough for me. Their engagement felt like a milestone, like all the struggles I had endured were finally leading somewhere meaningful. I thought my daughter had found someone who would care for her the way I always had. But I didn't know that this new chapter would slowly begin to erase everything I had built. At first, our Sundays together became something I looked forward to. They would come over for dinner, laugh at my stories, and thank me for the meals I prepared. For a while, everything felt balanced again. I allowed myself to believe that this was what life would look like moving forward, simple, stable, and filled with quiet happiness. But that illusion didn't last long, and the shift that followed was so gradual, I didn't notice it until it was already too late. When Ethan lost his job, the first request came. "Mom, can you help us just for this month?" It sounded temporary, reasonable even. Of course, I said yes. Then came another request and another after that. Mortgage payments, car bills, small loans that slowly became larger ones. Each time I told myself it was just until things got better, but instead of improving, something else started changing, and it wasn't their situation. It was their attitude. The calls became shorter, conversations became distant, excuses replaced connection. "I'm busy, Mom, I'll call later." But later never came. I found myself sitting by the phone waiting for something that didn't happen anymore. One afternoon, they invited me to lunch and I went, hopeful as always, but they never showed up. I sat there alone, stirring my coffee, watching other families laugh together. That was the moment I first felt it clearly. Something had shifted and I didn't know how to fix it. When Jenna suggested they stay with me just for a month while their apartment was being painted, I agreed without hesitation. I thought maybe this was an opportunity, a chance to reconnect, to rebuild what had started slipping away, but from the very first night something felt different, subtle at first but undeniable. My home no longer felt like mine, and I didn't realize it then, but that was only the beginning of something much deeper. Ethan began criticizing everything. The shower, the television, the internet, nothing seemed good enough. Jenna started rearranging my belongings without asking. My cabinets, my clothes, even things I had kept for decades were suddenly treated like clutter. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself they were just adjusting. But then they started handling my bills, my finances, my accounts, telling me it was for my own good. That was the moment something inside me felt uneasy, even if I couldn't fully explain why. What disturbed me most were the whispers. Conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room, forced smiles, quick explanations that never quite made sense. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't know how serious it had become until that voice message revealed everything they thought I would never hear. Her voice was cold, detached, calculated. She spoke about me like I was already gone. The plan was clear: move me into a facility, take control of my home, and prove I wasn't mentally capable of stopping them. And when I heard Ethan laughing in the background, it confirmed something I didn't want to accept. This wasn't just my daughter, this was both of them, and they had already gone too far. Then came the line that changed everything. "If something happens there, at least we'll still have the life insurance." I stopped breathing. For a moment, the world felt completely silent. That was the point where something inside me broke, but not in the way they expected, because instead of falling apart, I became very, very clear. I wasn't going to let them decide my ending, and what I chose to do next would change everything. The next morning, I walked into the bank with a calm I didn't feel the night before. I asked for everything, every transaction, every authorization, and as the manager scrolled through my account, her expression shifted. There were documents I had never signed, permissions I had never given. When I compared the signatures, the truth became undeniable. Someone had been forging my name, and I already knew who had access. We shut everything down immediately. Accounts secured, permissions revoked, passwords changed. I opened a new account and moved my savings. Then I made one more change: my life insurance beneficiary. I chose a foundation that supports abandoned seniors. If they thought they could profit from me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. And that was only the first step, because what came next would expose everything they had done. I left the bank that morning with something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. My hands were still slightly unsteady, but my thoughts were sharp, focused, and clear. For the first time since hearing that voice memo, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing, and I knew exactly where I needed to go next, because the plan they had made didn't start at the bank, it went deeper than that. My next stop was the county clerk's office, where my niece Brooke worked. Brooke had always been polite, a little nervous around me, but lately something about her behavior had felt off. Her visits had become less natural, more rehearsed, like she was playing a role she didn't fully understand. That morning, I walked in without calling ahead, without giving her any time to prepare. And the moment she saw me, I could tell I was right to come. "Good morning, Aunt Lorraine," she said, but her voice didn't sound steady. Her hands moved quickly across her desk, trying to gather papers, trying to hide something before I could notice. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I simply smiled and stepped closer. "No need to hide anything," I said gently. "I actually came because I'd like to understand exactly what Jenna asked you to do." And just like that, the tension in the room shifted completely. At first, she tried to brush it off. "It's nothing serious," she said quickly, "just routine updates." But I could see it in her eyes: fear, guilt, uncertainty, so I reached into my purse, took out my phone, and pressed play. The voice memo filled the room, every word echoing louder than before. Brooke's face changed instantly. Her shoulders dropped, her expression collapsed, and in that moment she knew there was no pretending anymore. The truth was already out. "Brooke," I said calmly, keeping my voice steady, "I know about the signatures, I know about the reports. You have a choice right now." I paused, letting the silence settle. "You can help me fix this, or I can walk straight to your supervisor, and after that it won't just be a job you lose." Tears welled up in her eyes almost immediately. She shook her head, her voice breaking as she tried to explain. "I didn't want to hurt you. Jenna said you weren't able to manage things anymore. She said it was for your own good, and she promised me money." And just like that, everything became even clearer than before. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her, I simply nodded. "Then this is your chance to make it right." And for the next 2 hours, Brooke worked beside me, undoing everything she had helped create. She pulled files, printed documents, and showed me every piece of paperwork that had been touched. Forged signatures, fake medical notes, drafts of property transfers. Every step of their plan was laid out in front of me, no longer hidden, no longer protected. And when I walked out of that office, I wasn't just carrying papers, I was carrying proof. By the time midday arrived, I was sitting across from an attorney named Daniel Whitman. His office was quiet, organized, almost cold in its precision, but it was exactly what I needed. I placed the folder on his desk and explained everything from the voice memo to the forged documents to Brooke's confession. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react emotionally. He simply listened, taking it all in with careful attention. And when I finished, he leaned back slightly and tapped the folder. "Miss Carter," he said calmly, "this is more than enough." His tone didn't change, but his words carried weight. "What you have here is a clear case: fraud, forgery, and attempted unlawful transfer of property. This isn't a misunderstanding, this is intentional." Hearing it said out loud made it real in a different way. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. This was exactly what it felt like, and worse. I told him I didn't want revenge just for the sake of it. I wasn't interested in hurting them the way they had tried to hurt me. What I wanted was protection. I wanted my independence secured. I wanted them to understand that there were consequences to what they had done, and Daniel nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then we'll move forward carefully," he said. "We'll protect you first, and then we'll hold them accountable." He laid out the plan step by step: emergency legal protection for my property, a civil case for damages, a criminal complaint that included all three of them. And then something even more important: an independent medical evaluation to prove I was fully capable. "Their entire plan depends on making you seem incapable," he explained. "The moment we disprove that, everything else collapses." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, it was precise, controlled, and effective, and for the first time in months I felt like the ground beneath me was steady again. Before I left, Daniel paused and looked directly at me. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "we do this in person. I'll come to your house with officers and a notary. We present everything at once. No delays, no warnings." I nodded slowly. The storm was coming, but this time I wasn't the one caught in it. And what would happen next, they would never forget. The next morning arrived quietly, almost too calmly. Jenna and Ethan were sitting in my living room drinking coffee like it was just another ordinary day. I had left a simple note the day before: running errands, back later. They didn't suspect anything. They didn't know what I had uncovered, what I had prepared, or what was about to walk through that front door. And at exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I stood up before either of them could move. When I opened the door, Daniel was there along with 2 officers and a notary. They stepped inside calmly, professionally, without raising their voices or causing a scene. But the moment Jenna saw them, her expression changed. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tight, uncertain. I didn't answer right away. I simply gestured for everyone to sit, because this wasn't going to be a conversation anymore, it was going to be the truth. Daniel placed the documents on the table one by one. He explained each piece clearly, showing the forged signatures, the false authorizations, the fabricated reports. Jenna tried to interrupt, tried to deny it, but I stopped her. "Just listen," I said firmly, and then I pressed play on my phone, the room filled with her own voice, the same words that had changed everything for me now echoing in front of everyone. This time, there was no denying it. This time, she had to hear herself. She lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but one of the officers stepped in immediately. Ethan started speaking quickly, trying to explain, trying to twist the situation, but the evidence was already there. The documents, the confession, the recording, it wasn't a debate anymore, it was a conclusion. And when the officer turned to me and asked, "Do you wish to proceed with charges?" I didn't hesitate. Because at that point, there was nothing left to question. After they were taken away, the house fell silent in a way I hadn't felt in months. For a brief moment, it felt like peace, but it didn't last. Within days, the situation shifted again, this time in a way I wasn't fully prepared for. Jenna took everything online. Posts appeared, stories twisted, narratives created. She painted me as confused, unstable, someone who needed care. Strangers began commenting, judging, believing a version of me that didn't exist. And suddenly the battle wasn't just legal, it was public. The calls started next. Late at night, from unknown numbers, voices filled with anger, accusations, words meant to hurt. Then came people at my door claiming to be social workers, asking questions, pushing boundaries. It felt overwhelming, chaotic, and at times I almost questioned myself. But every time I felt that doubt creeping in, I reminded myself of what I knew. I had the truth, I had the evidence, and no amount of noise could erase that. Daniel advised me to document everything, every message, every call, every visit, so I did. I wrote it all down carefully, building my own record just like I had built everything else in my life, with patience, detail, and intention. Their campaign was loud, but mine was quiet and solid. And in the end, that mattered far more. One evening, though, I nearly broke. A letter arrived, filled with words designed to cut deeper than anything else. It questioned my worth as a mother, my value as a person, even my existence. I sat on the kitchen floor holding that letter, and for the first time in all of this, I cried without holding back. For a moment, I wondered if they were right. If I had somehow failed, if pushing forward was too much. But then I remembered something my mother once wrote to me, a letter I had kept for years. I found it, unfolded it carefully, and read her words again. "Never let anyone take your dignity," she had written. "Love protects, it does not destroy." And just like that, something inside me steadied again. I wiped my tears, stood up, and made a decision. I wasn't stopping, not now. Not after everything. The next morning, I called Daniel, not to quit, but to move forward. And a week later, the outcome began to take shape. Jenna and Ethan wanted to settle. They offered to return the money, to stay away, to avoid trial. It was tempting in a way, it meant quiet, it meant an end, but I knew something important was still missing. "The truth," I said. "I want the truth." I told Daniel I would agree, but only if they signed a full confession, a public statement, one that cleared my name completely, admitted everything they had done, and corrected every lie they had spread. It wasn't about revenge, it was about restoring something they had tried to take from me. When the document was finally signed, I held it in my hands and read every word. They admitted it all, the lies, the manipulation, the attempt to take what wasn't theirs. And in that moment, something shifted, not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Because for the first time since all of this began, everything was exactly what it should have been, the truth. I sold the house not long after that. It held too many memories, too many reminders of what had happened. I moved into a smaller place, somewhere quiet, somewhere that felt like mine again. I started volunteering, helping others who had gone through similar situations. And slowly, piece by piece, I built something new, not out of what I lost, but out of what I learned. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't before. Love without boundaries isn't strength, it's vulnerability. And generosity without limits can be misunderstood in ways you never expect. But more importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself is not cruelty, it's necessary. If there's one thing my story proves, it's this: no matter your age, your voice matters, your dignity matters. And sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that protect you the most. Because in the end, it's not about what others try to take from you, it's about what you choose to protect.